You guys remember that one time the corporate press lied to you? You remember the other time the corporate press lied to you? Oh, wait, you remember how they're always lying to you? Let's talk about Dr. Fauci, my friends. Bombshell emails show Fauci was behind the February 2020 paper that he used to disprove COVID leaked from Wuhan lab weeks before publicly denying report had anything to do with him. My friends, I would like to start this segment off by saying Anthony Fauci should not be fired. I will now wait, let all of you stew for a moment and angrily comment, and now I will finish my thought and say he should be criminally charged and prosecuted for his involvement. We are talking about international incident level cover-up, malfeasance. Now, I'm not saying we come out and, Fauci is the guy who did it. I say you've got impropriety, you've got deception, fraud, whatever you name it, lying to the American people. Now, some may argue he should be charged in the deaths of many of these people who died of COVID, if not all of them. Why? If Dr. Fauci did not make this attempt to obfuscate the truth, how many lives could we have saved? If people were able to pursue the correct story and understand the origin of this virus, could we have created better treatments? I think the answer is yes. The more information you have, the better. Unfortunately for us, Dr. Fauci is an evil sociopath who decided covering up his impropriety was more important than the lives of billions of people. And I say billions because this thing spread all over the planet. And as we now believe, based on several reports from top-level U.S. intelligence agencies, lab leak makes the most sense, and it's widely becoming the dominant view. Now, this may evolve later on, but as it stands, Dr. Fauci provided funding to EcoHealth Alliance, Peter Daszak, who then provided funding to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, who was experimenting on bat coronaviruses in the city of Wuhan where the virus emerged. Logic dictates probably leaked from the lab. Now, the greater conspiracy theory, I should say, is that it didn't actually leak. Well, there's two. The next one is it was a leak, but it wasn't simple gain-of-function research for vaccines. It was bioweapons research. I don't know about all that. Intent is hard to prove. And even if it was bioweapons research, they can mask it by saying it wasn't, right? TNT wasn't invented, or I think TNT, right? Wasn't invented to kill people. It was invented for mining. I think that's what it was, right? What is it? Trinitrotoluene? Am I getting that wrong? Anyway, if it was a bioweapon that leaked, well, you shouldn't be doing bioweapon research. But again, they'll obfuscate it in some way. The greater conspiracy beyond that is that it was a bioweapon that was manufactured and then intentionally released. I don't believe that one. Sorry, I just don't. I think what they were likely doing was reckless gain-of-function research for a variety of reasons. One, now they're not going to call it bioweapons research, but the research absolutely would be used in bioweapons studies. Meaning, if someone was going to then compile a meta-analysis of biological, let's just say, composited viruses, they would be using this data. And I believe lab leak makes the most sense because the initial reports that we got were that the bats were pissing on people and biting on people. And I don't think that the standards in communist China are probably all that up to snuff. In which case it probably leaked. And then Fauci started sweating bullets, being like, oh, geez, what have I done? I should not have given that grant to Peter Daszak. You now have to wear 12 masks. And here we are. Here's the story from the Daily Mail. Dr. Anthony Fauci commissioned a February 2020 paper to disprove the possibility that COVID originated in a lab, only to pretend he was not involved in the study at a White House news conference weeks later. Arrest this man. Merrick Garland is, well, I think Vivek Ramaswamy has talked about going after these guys. I like that guy. Keep saying that at CPAC. Newly released emails uncovered by House Republicans probing the COVID-19 pandemic show the former head of the National Institutes of Allergy and Infectious Disease both commissioned and had final approval on a scientific paper which claimed it was improbable that the virus leaked out of a lab in Wuhan, China. Just a few weeks later, he stood next to then President Trump at a press conference and cited that very paper as evidence that the idea of lab leak was implausible. This is an image of pure corruption. A corrupt government official, the highest salaried guy, gives money to manufacture viruses. He denies it. He lies about it. Rand Paul holds up the document proving, saying, gain of function research, Fauci funding, NIAID, and he goes, no, I didn't do that. He lies. He lies to Congress. He then, while sweating, going, oh, geez, they're going to find out I did it. He then goes and commissions a paper to debunk the claims that are most likely true that this leaked from the Wuhan lab. That is called a cover-up, and he's been caught. Now we need criminal charges. Are we a nation of law and order? Sorry to say, I'm not so sure we are anymore. We may now be a nation of political power being wielded like a hammer against those who oppose the political tribe. So, Anthony Fauci, who is beloved by Democrats and the crackpots of mainstream media, why would Merrick Garland go after him? He plays ball. They say in January, a government watchdog agency blasted the NIH for failing to keep tabs on U.S.-sponsored virus experiments in China, which are feared to have caused the global pandemic. Amazing. Many media outlets started to dismiss the idea, only to later suggest the lab leak theory is possible as new evidence arose in supporting the claim. I'd like to give a shout out to our good friend, John Oliver. John Oliver is the worst kind of sophist. He goes on his show and he does this whole routine about conspiracy theories. And he's like, little Timothy here is sick and you're blaming China. And you know, whatever. I don't know. He says little Timothy all the time, which is kind of weird, but you know, you get the point. During the pandemic, he said, stop listening to conspiracy theories. Stop believing this stuff. Trust the experts. Well, lo, my friends, the experts were lying to you. On what? Well, we're uncovering more and more and more. But yeah, trust the experts. The beloved Dr. Fauci, the guy who not only seems to have caused the pandemic, according to this report, tried to cover it up. Let's say that again. Dr. Anthony Fauci provided, let's start from the beginning. He provided funding to Peter Daszak of EcoHealth Alliance, reportedly, who used that funding to do gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, reportedly. And it is now believed that the virus, the COVID-19 virus, leaked from the lab, reportedly. And then we're learning now, in this story, they state that Anthony Fauci commissioned a paper to debunk what we now believe to be true. Okay. Trust the experts, everybody. Don't forget, if you're driving home from work and you see someone injecting people in the arm in a 7-Eleven parking lot, that might be a good opportunity for you. Is not good advice. Don't take that advice. Go to your doctor. This is the craziest thing about all of this. The whole John Oliver did a vaccine thing where he was like, you know, ignore the conspiracies and you've got to go convince your family and friends. And I'm just like, look, man, no, you shouldn't. OK, you who are not a doctor, OK, should not go to your friends and family and say, go get medicated. Now, I will tell you this. If I'm sitting in my living room and I see a family member watching the TV and they're like, is Flabonapsta right for you? Call your doctor today. And they were like, I think I'm going to get that. I'd be like, no, I don't think you should. Telling someone not to get something is, I don't think you have the supreme moral authority to do it necessarily. You can do whatever you want. What I mean is, it is worse to tell someone to get medicated than to tell them not to get medicated, in my opinion. But it varies. Ultimately, what it comes down to is, yeah, why don't you not go to the 7-Eleven parking lot for your medicine? People were doing that. It's the craziest thing to me. I just can't believe it. And when I told people, guys, just go to the doctor's office and make sure you're good because you could have allergies, you could have a history of something. No, 7-Eleven parking lot it is. No kidding. No kidding. That's what they did. Lies. The bombshell emails released by the House Republicans on Sunday show that Fauci commissioned and edited a paper entitled The Proximal Origin of SARS-CoV-2 before he cited it as evidence that COVID did not originate from a lab in Wuhan. It was written just 4 days after Fauci and his NIH boss, Francis Collins, held a call with the authors to discuss reports that COVID may have been leaked from a genetic testing lab in Wuhan and may have been intentionally genetically manipulated. Well, we now believe that to be true. And in the emails, most people believed it to be true for the entire time. Seems like they were proven right. In the emails, Dr. Christian Andersen admits that Fauci prompted him to write the paper with the goal of disproving the lab leak theory. He submitted the peer-reviewed paper to Nature Medicine on February 12, 2020, with a cover email reading, "There's been a lot of speculation, fear-mongering, and conspiracies put forward in this space. This paper was prompted by Jeremy Farrar, Tony Fauci, and Francis Collins. A letter sent by Scripps Research on his behalf later insisted that Anderson objectively researched the origins of COVID and claimed that Fauci did not influence his work. But the report by House Republicans says, according to previously released emails, this assertion is demonstrably false. It points to a February 8th, 2020 email in which the doctor stated, our main work over the last couple of weeks has been focused on trying to disprove any type of lab theory. Others also apparently worked to ensure the paper strongly dismissed the idea of lab leak. Farrar, who was then the head of the British nonprofit The Wellcome Trust, which has historic ties to the pharmaceutical industry and is now the chief scientist at the World Health Organization, tried to push through an edit, replacing the word unlikely to improbable in a statement about the possibility of a lab leak origin. Is this the guy that got all that money? He's the guy who called Fauci and said, yo, looks like a lab leak. And then Fauci was like, no, it isn't. And he goes, looks like it's not. Thank you for the money, Dr. Fauci. I think that's the guy, right? What do we got going on here? Flashback. MSNBC's Nicole D. Wallace. Trump is pushing intel agencies to investigate conspiracy theory. COVID originated in the lab. Let me I always get the audio wrong on this thing. Let me get it for you.
Rankled today by Trump's effort at reputational repair. The New York Times also advances recent reporting on U.S. intelligence agencies, which we learned this week provided intel in the president's PDB as early as January about the lethal spread of COVID. Those same agencies now have been tapped with investigating one of Trump world's most favorite conspiracy theories. New York Times reports this, quote, senior Trump administration officials have pushed American spy agencies to hunt for evidence to support an unsubstantiated theory that a government lab in Wuhan, China was the origin of the coronavirus outbreak. That's according to current and former American officials. The effort comes as President Trump escalates a campaign to blame China for the pandemic. Some intel analysts are concerned that the pressure from the administration officials will distort assessments about the virus. And
wow, how amazingly evil
they could be used as a political weapon in an intensifying battle with China over a disease that has infected more than 3 million people across the globe. The stories of Trump reaching deep into the government agencies charged with science.
Wow. So they're all lying to you. How about that? Here's the New York Post. New York Times, MSNBC, CNN slammed for claiming COVID lab leak theory was debunked. It wasn't. It was never debunked. In fact, the only evidence we really had suggested that it was true in, I think it was South China University, Beijing. I mentioned earlier, they claimed that bats that were infected were biting and peeing on people, and that may be how it spread. Well, they retracted that study, and I think the scientists involved, they're probably dead. But hey, you never know if you're going against the regime, which is the big problem with communism, to be honest. The problem is you might just be doing your job as you're told. And you'll be like, hey, we did that report you wanted. It looks like the coronavirus leaked from the lab. And they go, oh, wow, is that really the case? And then you are no longer a scientist. You are worm food. Because what you do and what you say isn't material, who you are and your feelings. In countries like this, what matters is the machine. And if you are a threat to the machine, even if you would bend the knee in 2 seconds to worship the machine, they'll kill you. They say that's fine, but end of story. Sooner or later, you'll tell somebody. End of story. For you, at least. Credibility crisis. 60 Minutes tries turning back the clock after declaring COVID lab leak theory debunked. CBS News' Scott Pelley said attacks on the Wuhan lab were the result of a political disinformation campaign. Oh, really? Really? They say back in May, CBS News' Scott Pelley cast significant doubt on the Trump administration's assertions of the theory, telling viewers both the White House and the Chinese Communist Party have been less than honest. They start by saying, in recent days, the theory that COVID originated from a lab leak in Wuhan had been embraced by FBI Director Christopher Wray. And a bombshell report indicated that the U.S. Energy Department believes the virus likely started in the lab. However, back in May 2020, CBS News' Scott Pelley cast significant doubt on the Trump administration. Instead, Pelley hyped the credibility of Peter Daszak, president of EcoHealth Alliance, as one of the world's most vocal foes of the lab leak theory. Why? Well, EcoHealth Alliance received government funding from the NIH and has a long-working partnership with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So, conflict of interest, much? And there you go. Welcome to the news, my friends. That's what it is. Check this one out. CNN ex-boss Jeff Zucker told staff not to probe lab leak theory because it was Trump talking point. How's it going for you being in the cult, cultists? Plugging your ears yet? Don't want to hear the truth? Oh, Dr. Fauci, tell me what to do. I love that about Dr. Fauci. He comes out and he's like, you don't need to be wearing a mask right now. And then people are like, you Republicans are all dumb for wearing masks. Then he comes out like 3 weeks later and be like, we now believe you should probably be wearing masks, 2 of them. I love the double masking story. Oh, I love this one. So a news anchor is talking to Fauci and she's like, people are saying that wearing a mask protects you, but it's just common sense that if you wore 2 masks, you'd probably be even more protected. And Fauci actually is like, no, there's no reason to wear 2 masks. 1 mask is good enough. And then later he gets asked about it again. And then he's like, well, yes, of course. Or I think, yeah. At first he's like, no, you don't need to do it. But then later someone asked him, like, isn't it common sense? Like, well, yeah, sure. And then all of a sudden the government comes down. It's like, everybody should wear 2 masks. 2 of them. The craziest thing to me is when I go out and people are still masking. Because at this point, with all the data that's been released, you'd think people would not. But they still are. Don't ask me why. I think it's the weirdest thing. But you know what I will say is, it's funny because y'all know that I talk about going to the local casino. Normally you can't wear masks because they got cameras everywhere. But now it's like, you can. So, of course, the people who want to, like they're playing poker and they got sunglasses on and they're wearing a Fauci mask and a hood up. Like they don't want you to be able to see their face. Oh, yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah, some people, man, they are living and swimming in the crackpot conspiracy theory reality. You see, it was always the conspiracy theory that it was a wet market. That's right. That's right. They wanted you to believe that the virus factory, with funding from the U.S. government, which does research, gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses, was not the source. Now, that's Occam's razor. In the absence of evidence, the solution that makes the least amount of assumptions tends to be correct. What they wanted you to believe, that some schemers in China traveled 1,000 miles. They got like a hiking backpack on and a stick, and they make it through the mountains. They push the leaves away there, and then they see the bats, and they're like, wow, and the bats are shiny. And then they hunt the bats and they put them in a bag and they say, if we bring these bats 1,000 miles to Wuhan, we will sell them to the people in a wet market and what? Seriously? Reportedly, the bats that had the virus came from 1,000 miles away. So who's traveling halfway across the country to deposit these bats at a wet market? It's just, I don't know. That one makes a lot of assumptions. It's possible. Don't get me wrong. I'm not an evolutionary biologist or a virologist, but I got to tell you, as a layman, at least in this regard, in the absence of evidence, et cetera, the lab that works on these viruses makes more sense as where the virus came from, as opposed to just so happens that someone did all these things and then sold a bat across the street from the Wuhan lab. Come on. The media actually wanted you to believe all that, though. The media kept saying it was a debunked conspiracy theory, and it's crazy because it was never debunked. It was entertainable. At the very least, I got no problem being like, well, I don't know for sure. I'm not going to sit here and come out and tell you definitively. Even right now, it's 2 agencies, the DOE, the Department of the Department of Energy, not education, the Department of Energy and the FBI believe it leaked from a lab. I don't know why the rest of them don't. Whatever. The Department of Energy oversees biolabs, and the FBI, of course, does investigations, and this makes the most sense. Anyone telling you, this is a good litmus test, actually. Anybody who tells you that the wet market is more likely than the Wuhan lab, you can tell if they're liars. Anyone who says they believe the wet market over the lab is lying to you, or they're real dumb. Probably lying. And they're probably lying in an attempt to fit in with what the perceived norm is. And that is a dangerous person to be around. So I think I'm going to start asking people, hey, do you think that the virus came from the wet market or from the virus factory? And then when they say the wet market, oh, okay, not the virus factory across the street from the wet market. Yeah, I think, okay, you can leave. There you go. Litmus test. There's just no way. I mean, let me clarify. There is no way a rational person would lean towards the wet market at this point, especially. Now, as for the emergence of it, no. Look, don't get me wrong. I think there's a very slim possibility the wet market story is real. Not being a virologist, I don't know. Based on everything we've seen, though, at this point, how could you conclude anything other than lab leak? You've got Fauci commissioning papers to try and protect him. No, I think this guy is crooked, corrupt, and I think we know the truth. So let me just wrap up by succinctly saying, prosecute Fauci. Lock him up. I'll leave it there. If you want to support our work, become a member at timcast.com. And next segment's coming up on this channel around 4 p.m. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see y'all then.